I still don't see.
Okay, we are live and good morning, everybody. This is Tuesday, February 15th, Senate Transportation Committee. And our first item this morning is S-190. We're dealing with states right away. There was a bill introduced, as we all know, about landscaping and streetscaping. And I guess we have some folks with us this morning. Andrea Wright, Agency of Transportation, Environmental Program Manager. Is that correct?
Environmental Policy Manager.
Policy Manager. Okay. All right. So you probably know what we're dealing with here. So go right ahead. It's yours.
Okay. Am I sharing?
Yes, you are. Thank you. Yep.
Okay, great. Good morning, and thank you, Chair Mazza. To start off, I'd like to just introduce myself. For the record, my name is Andrea Wright, and I am the Environmental Policy Manager at the Agency of Transportation. And I'm replacing Dan Dutcher upon his retirement from state government at the end of the year. So I've been in this policy position just since the beginning of the year, but I've been with the Agency of Transportation in an environmental capacity for over 21 years.
Wow, I guess you know a lot about environmental issues.
Let's hope so. Throughout my career, and especially in my most recent position as the right-of-way and environmental programs manager, I work closely with Dan, as well as his predecessor, Gina Crampoli, on the development of and implementation of environmental policy for the agency. And I know Dan presented to your committee on a regular basis. And I know Senator Kitchell, you said you missed him the other day in some testimony, and we certainly do too here at the agency. But I look forward to also discussing transportation environmental policy with all of you, and specifically today, as it relates to the agency's work involving landscaping and streetscaping. And joining me today is Chris Lazar from our Highway Division Project Delivery Bureau, and Rob Thaley from our District Maintenance and Fleet Division. So just getting briefly a quick overview of S-190. You have had the bill introduced to your committee and have sponsorship amongst your committee members, so you're familiar. But just to recap, this bill proposes to require the Agency of Transportation to work with affected municipalities on replanting trees when certain trees are removed from the state highway right-of-way, and to require additional landscaping and streetscaping in certain areas along state highways. And so when VTrans is considering actions that involve trees in areas where housing predominates in a downtown village or a village setting, the bill proposes that we ensure that landscaping and streetscaping is incorporated into the design, that we provide written notice to abutting property owners and the municipality prior to removing any tree that's more than 6 inches in diameter. It requires us to develop a planting plan when the agency removes a tree that is greater than 10 inches. And it also requires the development of a landscaping, streetscaping, and tree removal and replanting policy that includes the specific measures introduced in the bill and addresses maintenance responsibilities. So that's a real brief recap of the bill, and we can go into the details and have further discussion if the committee chooses. But first, we'd like to provide an overview of the tree-related policies the agency has in place that will help provide some context for that further discussion. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Chris Lazar to go through some of those existing policies at the agency.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea, and thank you all for having us. I'm Chris Lazar, the VTrans PDB Environmental Resources Coordinator and the Interim Environmental Program Manager. Thanks for having us. S-190 proposes an additional layer that overlaps and intertwines with existing policies and mechanisms we already have in place regarding trees and VTrans right away. So right at the start, I think it's really important for me to make a distinction between our federal aid project work and our maintenance and operation district work. The district work involving trees is all about safety, keeping people and goods moving safely through Vermont. Our federal aid projects are the projects funded by Federal Highway Administration, and they have the luxury of going through a much more detailed design process than the district work. And as a result, those are the projects that can spend a lot more time considering landscaping. With that in mind, I'll go over some of the main policies and mechanisms that we have in place to guide our actions around trees.
Could I ask a question, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Senator.
Okay, so when the bill got presented to us, the concern or the whole issue got raised by the removal of a number of very old and beautiful maples in a village neighborhood. And Senator Perchlik, was it East Middlebury, I believe. And so could you tell me, for example, that situation in a small village, which that would come under the state versus the federal? I'm just wondering, since you said there are two different buckets here.
Yeah, but I think those buckets overlap. And Andrea and Rob, please correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, we have projects like Waterbury Main Street that go through a village setting, but we also have roadways that we're responsible for taking care of that go through village settings. So our maintenance and operation division, they have a nexus with projects in the downtown setting at a different level, as do our program projects. Does that make sense?
Okay, sure. I was just wondering.
Okay.
Which bucket, or maybe you have a foot in each bucket. I don't know. I guess it would depend on the project.
Okay, well, it might, as I go through these policies, I think we'll try to keep a distinction, and I think maybe that will help kind of, I don't know, maybe clarify.
Okay.
So I guess first and foremost, our Highway Division Project Delivery Bureau environmental program has a new top-notch level landscape architect on staff. Her nexus to VTrans work is primarily with federal aid projects. However, she also frequently offers technical assistance and guidance to our maintenance and operation programs. I think she's doing a training this morning with them. Regarding our federal aid projects, from early on in the project planning and scoping and throughout the design process, we have policies in place that guide the incorporation of landscape into projects. So in collaboration with our landscape architect, project design teams look to avoid, minimize, and mitigate impacts to existing landscape features, which includes preserving and replacing trees. And all along the way, our landscape architect has early input on the corridor plans, long before a project has been programmed. She also has input on scoping studies for projects before we even have conceptual plans. During that process, and primarily more in urban or downtown settings, we're working closely with the municipalities to understand their goals for landscaping. And we take that into consideration with our projects. By statute, Vermont, VTrans is required to consider complete streets in all of our projects. And with the exception of a few exempt project types, complete streets signed into laws, I believe Act 34 is a set of guiding principles that requires the needs of all transportation users to be considered. Our implementation of complete streets principles, it varies, and it's commensurate with the scope of the project type. So if we're talking about a 1.5 inch pavement overlay project, there's probably not a lot of complete streets incorporation. On the other side of the spectrum is like a Waterbury Main Street project, which contains a lot of complete streets principles. Linked to complete streets within VTrans are two guidance documents that we work closely with: the 2012 VTrans guidance document on implementing complete streets, as well as our landscape guide. So that's kind of the overview of the program projects, and then some nuts and bolts about district projects. Rob can go way deeper into that when he's up. But as I mentioned earlier, the district work around trees is dictated by safety, and it's always on a much more accelerated pace than our federal aid projects.
Do
So
municipalities follow the same guidelines? Are they all, I know the state highways under one jurisdiction. How about a municipality? Do they follow the same guidelines when they're doing a road project, or it's up to the municipality themselves?
I'll defer to Andrea on
Okay,
on
all
that.
right.
They're not using our guidance documents
Okay,
as far as I can tell.
okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah. So we developed, I believe it was in 2015, a tree cutting guidance. No, that was 2021 tree cutting guidance, which is the overarching guidance document for all of our district work. And this document outlines standard operating procedures for addressing environmental compliance and stewardship when addressing hazard trees. Hazard trees are categorized by level of risk. If a tree is a high risk and imminent threat to the safety of the traveling public or private developed property, district forces or the contractors, they can and should remove the tree as quickly as possible, and they're not obligated to coordinate with the environmental section. To oversimplify this guidance document, the level of coordination outlined in the district guidance increases in direct proportion to the decrease in level of risk. So if it's not a high risk tree, then we have time to make sure it's not a potential bat roost tree or part of a state or national register eligible historic property. So risk and is directly related to the response time. Now, the Vermont, the VTrans street tree policy, that's the 2015 document. That offers direction to municipalities that want to plant trees in the right of way. And that 2015 document articulates an understanding of the value of public street trees. It also touches on the complexity of maintaining safety considerations for VTrans, but this is a policy mechanism through which municipalities can plant trees within the state right of way, working through the districts. And it offers two distinct approaches to do that. The first approach, municipalities, they can choose to adopt all maintenance of a specific section of highway designated as a class 1 road, and that would allow them the flexibility to plant trees within the right of way. The other option includes the issuance of a Title 19 Section 1111 permit to allow the municipality to work within the state highway right of way for planting trees. And so they could work through that 1111 permitting process. And then I think lastly, just sort of to show the kind of complexity of things we're dealing with in regards to trees, we just developed a emerald ash borer management plan to try to stay ahead of the devastating damage of the emerald ash borer, which are essentially creating massive amounts of hazard trees. We spent a significant effort this past field season mapping stands of ash trees so that the district forces can address them before they come high risk hazard trees. And I believe that is kind of the sort of really fast overview of how we interface with trees, primarily in the Project Delivery Bureau. I'll pass it along to Rob now.
Okay.
My question, getting all this information, we have this bill in front of us. Does the agency have a position on it?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's, yeah, because there's no, whatever the bill addresses, are we doing what the bill addresses now?
I think if I might just chime in here, that's exactly it. And the purpose of us going through all of these existing policies is really to say that the highlights of the bill are predominantly already covered by existing policy and the way that we implement them.
So I guess it comes back to the situation at hand. which precipitated this, which a community felt that in a neighborhood where the residential neighborhood, trees were removed. And obviously they were concerned about what it does. Trees are obviously traffic calming, and which is important in where people are living in residential areas. With all the regulations or the reviews and criteria, maybe you're not prepared to answer now, but why were the trees taken down that resulted in, it must have been consistent with the parameters that you have out there. So I guess one of the questions is, were these healthy trees? Why were they taken down? Why were they a hazard when in fact trees are viewed as traffic calming? That's kind of what's going through my mind, because certainly neighborhoods and residential areas are quite different than, you know, where you have slower or lower traffic limits, speed limits, as opposed to the open highway.
Right. To specifically answer your question, and what Chris alluded to is the work of the agency around trees is specific to a safety risk. And in East Middlebury, it was a hazard tree. It was a dying tree, or trees. And there was coordination between the districts, you know, according to our policy and the way we lay out how we operate. They did coordinate with the tree warden in the town. And the tree warden agreed that it was a risk tree and in poor health and needed to come down. And so
that's very helpful, Andrea. Then the next question is, once they're taken down, is there a plan to replace them? And if so, where does that responsibility, because you're in the right of way?
There is no plan from the agency in our existing policies to replace the trees. But we do provide the opportunity for the towns, for the municipality to come to us and seek to replace those trees. And with certain guidance laid out in the street tree policy, there is an opportunity to put in another tree. So they would ask for that sort of permission through either taking it on as a Class 1 town highway, and then you know, understanding the maintenance responsibilities that go along with that into the future. Or they could do seek a permit through our 1111 process to come in and put a tree in. And then we would also come up with some sort of agreement for future maintenance of that tree. So a lot of the things that are in S190 do exist in our existing policy.
Okay, so it is possible when you're negotiating with the town to say, for these reasons, these trees need to be removed. Can you do it as a package so that once they're removed, if they has to go through the 1111, can it all be done so that removal and replanting and the approval can all be done as a one package?
Yes, and going back to East Middlebury, excuse me, that's sort of where we are right now with that process. We needed to take down the tree, and we are in coordination with the town right now to see if they would seek, you know, the 1111 permit or Class 1 town highway designation to come up with a plan to plant something else.
Prior to this bill, I had never heard of a problem, because every time I've seen construction, any highways, they always bring it back better than it was. I mean, it looks beautiful. The grass is planted, the trees are, so I don't know why this bill was introduced, because I've never heard this to be a problem. Senator Perchlik.
The problem is when the trees are cut down when they're hazard trees, because and maybe, I don't know what happened in East Middlebury, I wasn't involved, and maybe the tree warden said, sure, go ahead, but nobody else knew about it. So it's a surprise to a community. This happened in my district too, where I guess they were hazard trees, and just, you know, one day the homeowners have these beautiful trees, and then the next day there's somebody cutting them down. They're like, oh my God, you know, they're just kind of shocked by it. And they call their select board, and the select board says, we don't know, AOT is cutting it down. It's in there right away. So that's why the bill was introduced to try to make, more support for the towns. And I understand why, if you have a hazard tree, you want to cut it down. I guess the feeling is that there's a questioning whether all the trees are cut down all the time are hazard trees. So it seems like if there's this policy that if it's not a hazard tree, that the form needs to be filled out. So I assume for the trees that I'm aware of that were cut down, we could ask for the forms that were filled out, and just to see that the process is being followed. Because I think people don't feel like it's being followed, and so they want more control over the process to make sure that it's being followed and people are participating in the program.
Yeah, and perhaps, there is room for the existing street tree policy that we have to be a little bit more explicit in the coordination that occurs. I think it's standard practice for the districts, and Rob could speak to this more because he's one of those people that would coordinate that. But yeah, it's standard practice that we would communicate with the town and the tree warden, and it does get to that to some degree, but like I said, maybe that could be more explicit in our street tree policy. And it is standard practice for us to go. I don't know what happened in certain situations, and maybe there was some variance from that, who knows. I think, Senator Mazza, I appreciate your comments on, when we do go through a community and we have a project and we are able to incorporate landscaping and streetscaping, often the town is appreciative of that, and it does look a lot better.
Look at Waterbury, for example. There's a perfect example.
Right, that's a town that I live in, and it's
Hey, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. I've never seen it. You would go through that. It's unbelievable what they did there. In comparison to what it was. So I'm trying to figure out.
I just excuse me, but I just wanted to make the point that we have recognized in the past that continued maintenance of the trees are great, and they have a lot of purposes that are beneficial to health, and those are all pointed out in our street tree policy, but they do need to be cared for continuously. And so we have recognized in the past that has been a trouble spot for our agency to continue to do that when we have so many other assets that need to be maintained, for a greater purpose that's more aligned with our mission and our goals. So in our project development now, we are certainly offering that towns can incorporate landscape, and we work closely with them to do that, but we're also working with them to understand what the schedule for maintenance and the cost for maintenance would be, and looking to work that into our finance and maintenance agreement so that the town can take it over, that aspect of it, because if it's not taken care of, it doesn't look good. It doesn't serve the purposes, and it gets into poor health. And it's just been a real struggle with our resources that we have.
Okay. Further questions? Yes, Senator Birchlick.
Yeah, Ms. Wright. So for using Waterbury's example, cut down a lot of big trees. I agree. It's a benefit for the community, even though the big trees were cut down because of all the other improvements. But the new trees will be the responsibility of Waterbury to care for those as they grow along the roadway there.
Chris, I don't know if you mentioned that in your part. I am actually not positive about the details of whether or not that's a Class 1 town highway or what the finance and maintenance agreement on that project might be. But yeah, that is the direction that the agency is going in, is to have the town take over that maintenance.
I didn't mention that, and like you, I'm not exactly sure of the status of that stretch of roadway in Waterbury. I can find out.
So it just depends on the roadway and who planted the trees.
Senator Kitchell, you had a question?
Well, yes. Would the purchase of the trees be the response? We're talking about the main, and I agree. We had a lot of trees planted here in the Danville Village project. I think you could plant the Japanese lilacs upside down and they would manage to thrive, but the really other trees, many of them didn't survive, which is unfortunate. There's some oaks and there's, we had one on our property that died because there wasn't really the maintenance. They got planted, but there really wasn't ongoing maintenance. So my question is for these, unless it's in part of the project itself, they're being taken down because they're hazard trees, would the replanting, the purchase, and as well as the tending of the trees fall to the municipality?
Yes, in our current policy, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Senator Chittenden, Senator Ingalls? Any issues in South Burlington as a councilman?
We have the Emerald Ash borer causing different frustrations, but it's all consistent with what has been presented today. So no questions from me.
Okay, anything else on this subject? It sounds like I don't know whether we need more legislation on this issue. I don't know what else we can do. I mean, it sounds like it's being done now. And maybe there was one instance that caused a little stir, but I don't know if it needs legislation or not, but you can help me out.
Chair, Mr.
Yes.
Chair, I could provide a little bit more background
ahead.
on
Yes, sorry, go ahead.
maintenance procedures, or at least the Middlebury issue.
Okay,
Okay, so my name is Robert Faley. I'm the Maintenance District Administrator for the V-Trans in the Southwest region. And just a little bit more background to give you a better idea of how V-Trans approaches tree cutting operations. So as you know, the vast majority of state highway mileage is located within more rural environments, away from village or urban settings. And these are the locations where we focus the majority of our tree cutting operations. Using a risk-based approach, we consider cutting trees that overhang the road or potentially cause harm to private property or the traveling public. By contrast, in village or urban settings where older or these more majestic trees may exist, it's typically the municipality or the property owner who contacts V-Trans to alert us of dead branches or dying or rotted trees. V-Trans does not go out seeking to cut these trees unless there is a very obvious problem. Then, unfortunately, due to their size, we often need to hire a professional tree cutting service to do the work for us. We typically contact the adjacent property owner and also ask if they like the wood from the cut up tree. So aside from immediate hazard mitigation, we follow the environmental standard operating procedures when determining what trees to cut and when to cut them. As you know, as we're discussing now, V-Trans does not replace trees cut along state highways, but we allow certain conditions. Municipalities may want to replace those trees, and that's where we follow the V-Trans street tree policy, where we either offer them the opportunity to take over that portion of state highway as a Class 1 town highway, or pursue a Section 1111 permit to work within the state highway right-of-way. V-Trans does not have the expertise nor the resources, staff, or budget to implement or maintain a robust tree maintenance program. We barely have enough resources to maintain our current infrastructure without add-on appurtenances like a vegetation management plan. But we do have the tools in place to help others reach these planning goals. And I know I've got several specific examples in my region where we have successfully collaborated with municipalities to replant vegetation within the state's right-of-way. And if you want a little bit more history on Middlebury, it was Route 125, which is also known as East Main Street. It is a state highway, not a Class 1 town highway. And in July, as Plant Tree Services, they were working for Green Mountain Power on power line maintenance. S. Blunt called the Middlebury tree warden for guidance on a large sugar maple that they wanted to remove. The tree warden agreed that it was a hazard, but said he had no jurisdiction because it was a state highway. So that one tree was aggressively trimmed by S. Blunt. It was basically a glorified stump when we got out there. Another was identified as completely rotted. So V-Trans hired a contractor to cut the two trees, cut the stumps flush with the ground. But while we were out there, we discovered two other trees were rotted and we cut those as well. So there are 4 trees in total that we took down. In August of last year, the Middlebury Director of Operations reached out to V-Trans District 5 to replant those trees within the state's right-of-way in accordance with the V-Trans street tree policy. We provided Middlebury with a Section 1111 permit and the maintenance agreement forms, and we are still waiting to hear back. And
Don't need any more.
I'm guessing that they're waiting for this legislation to go through before they finalize that. But that's my background. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Why would they need to wait for this legislation? Could you just connect that last comment?
I don't know, because we provided them with the information and we have not heard back from them yet.
Okay.
So I don't know if there's a holdup for some reason, but they were working with their local, I don't know if it was a garden club or something, but they were going to buy the trees and replant them under the Section 1111 permit.
Can I get our screen back? It's still on. Can we share the screen again, or am I the only one?
How do I?
I
stop
think they
sharing
probably
stuff?
had more they wanted to give us.
Oh, okay, there we go. We're back. All right, thank you. Okay, any other questions, comments on the subject? Sounds like we got enough information, I think.
I have one more.
Yeah, go right ahead, Senator Ingles.
So-
Senator Pertlet.
Thank you. So AOT would be able to send me some examples of those SOP forms where that were filled out for moderate risk trees. I guess that's what I'm asking. Could someone from AOT send me completed forms that were filled out by staff when they cut the moderate risk trees?
Yeah, we can get those for you. I just want to make sure that you understand that that is a guidance to point out the environmental coordination that needs to occur. So it's not necessarily going to document that they reached out to a municipality. It's just going to say what their process was for understanding what type of tree, what risk category, and what environmental coordination happened in accordance with the guidance.
And as far as reaching out to landowners or the town, there wouldn't be any documentation of such. There isn't another form for that.
There isn't a form. I don't know if there's emails or anything like that, but yeah.
And I would defer to Rob on the actual forms. Are they like treating those, when they do the risk assessment, is that like a checklist for them, or are they filing forms? I don't know that we're collecting forms.
Right. And I'm not sure. They may have done that and just kept it within their own files. And I'll have to reach out to District 5 to see what they have.
I don't know, and we could check, but I don't know that we ask them to fill out forms when they're going through the risk assessment. I think it's a guidance document and more of a checklist, but I can double check on that. We definitely did not want to burden the districts with a paperwork exercise when it came to these trees.
Yeah, and we coordinated with regulators as well to say when is it necessary to coordinate and when is it okay not to, and to sort of protect the resources within the environmental program that does reviews, because the districts are out there doing things all the time, and so we're just trying to work collaboratively to put processes in place that cover our bases without having to channel everything to the same people all the time.
So the they, I'm struggling with the use of the pronoun they. Who makes the ultimate determination that the tree is a hazard? Is that the district? Is that in your shop at central office? Is it done sort of a two-step where the AOT, whoever the they in AOT might be, contacts the tree warden for the town, and then there's concurrence? I'm just kind of confused about who the players are and who the they might be. I've got to go and disconnect my phone. I'll be right back.
And just to follow up on Senator Kitchell's point, I mean, I guess that's the concern that I heard a couple of years ago. I didn't, put in the bill at the time, but that's what I heard, that when the homeowners in Waitsfield that had some trees cut tried to find out what the process was, they weren't able to find out kind of what the process was. And when I asked 2 years ago or 3 years ago about it, I was just sent the tree policy and said, like, we already do it. But basically similar to what you said was, we're already doing all this. And what Senator Hardy experienced was in Middlebury was that why she introduced the bill is like she didn't feel like whatever was in the policy now was being done, and that there was a need for more oversight to make sure some of those things were getting done. So I guess we just, or at least I and Senator Hardy, want to make sure that the things that are already in policy are actually being done. I think that's the concern, that sometimes if there is a process to say who's deciding that it's a hazardous tree or not, and if they're deciding it's, well, a moderate risk tree, are those processes about contacting folks and looking at other options, is that being done? Or is it just in the policy guidance book?
So typically they is the garage supervisor. We don't have arborists, but we have quite a few loggers, previous loggers in our employment. They reasonably have it, they're not looking to go out and create work for themselves. If they identify a tree that is a hazard to either come down in an ice or windstorm and block the road or possibly cause injury, they follow the SOP and they make that determination out in the field.
And one more added layer to the it would be the regards to the emerald ash borer and the guidance document. So the environmental staff, we hired 2 temporaries last year, and we did a pretty massive mapping job of the interstates and some of the other major connectors to identify stands of ash that will need to be addressed. And then the environmental group has had significant input in the tree guidance document regarding when it's a high level hazard and what level of coordination versus when it's a low hazard.
I would hope that we could resolve this without new legislation, but we'll certainly think about what we're doing. And anything else this morning, we'll move on. Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, thank you very much for coming in. It's an interesting subject, and we hope we can resolve it. Probably sometime we don't need added legislation, but Senator Pertlick, we can follow through on that, okay?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, everybody.
Very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, our next item, excuse me, this morning is S-277, an act relating to motor vehicle efficiency feedbacks. I know we have Wanda with us, Mike Smith, and who else is with us this morning?
And Michelle Boomhauer. It takes a second for our camera to kick on. Sorry.
Okay, all right. Oh, we got the big boss today. Michelle's with us. All right. Okay. We got to be careful now. Yeah. Good morning, folks.
Morning, Senator Mazza.
Morning. Good morning, everybody. Okay, tell us what you want to talk about today. What's S-277 do? I forgot already.
All right. I'm going to give you a little overview, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mike Smith, Deputy Commissioner of Motor Vehicles, for some information related to administrative impacts on DMV. S-277, the bill establishes a fee-bate program for all pleasure cars, be it an efficiency fee or rebate at the time of initial registration by an owner in the state. And it requires that a person who sells a personal car, of which the person is the current owner, be subject to a vehicle efficiency fee registration credit equal to the currently applicable vehicle efficiency rebate or transfer fee equal to the current applicable vehicle efficiency fee in the case of a rebate. That's complicated enough to say.
I'm already confused already. I mean, maybe I'm the only one, but who introduced this? I forgot. I didn't have it in front of me. Who introduced this?
This was Senator McDonald's bill.
Okay.
And so it directs the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles to establish for each model year the applicable efficiency fees and rebates, which are designed to be revenue neutral based on the combined fuel economy divided into at least 3 groups of vehicles, and apply to both the lease of, and purchase of new, and used pleasure cars, and that these would decrease proportionally based on their depreciated value percentage. And it directs the motor vehicle commissioner to adopt rules relating to efficiency fees on or before January 1st, 2023, and to produce a
25 more
report.
people to run.
Yeah, so we have some similar fee-bait language or language related to fee-baits in H552, a bill over in the House on transportation, climate matters. And based on our review of the proposal, the bill would create a complex and difficult structure to administer. It would establish a fee-bait program, which would require significant resources from the DMV, and it's unclear whether fee-baits can significantly change vehicle purchasing behavior and whether such a program might not disproportionately affect rural residents and low to moderate income Vermonters. At this time, to the best of our knowledge, no fee-bait programs have been established in the US. The province of Ontario discontinued its fee-bait program about a decade ago. And there are a few European countries who have established these programs, but we don't have details on their performance. We did a study on fee-baits for you back in 2019, 2020. And in that, it outlined the framework for various fee-bait alternatives, which is as an approach to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And it's, like I said, not without significant impacts to equity and administrative costs as outlined in that study. I would further sort of reference the initial Vermont Climate Action Plan, which was adopted this past December, which has 4 pathways for transportation GHG reductions, including addressing light duty vehicle electrification, heavy duty electrification, reduction in vehicle miles traveled, and lowering carbon intensity of fuels. And in those 4 pathways, there are actually 10 strategies to produce action in those areas. And none of those 10 strategies include using fee-baits as an approach for lowering GHG emissions in the initial climate action plan. So we continue to feel that it's unclear whether this is a reasonable approach, but we do know that the burden of this approach, not only to the state for administration, but potentially to Vermonters, may be more significant than we understand. I'm going to pause right there. Mike's going to go into some of the logistics of what it might look like to implement a fee-bait program for DMV. But I would ask if there's any initial questions before Mike continues.
Before we move on, Senator McDonald, we don't want to hold you up. Would you like to express some of your thoughts on this bill before we continue on, please?
Yes, Europeans have tried fee-baits. If you look at the record, you'll see that they tried to be moderate in their approach, and they lumped cars, pleasure vehicles by class. Some places did it in 4 different groups, others did it in 5 or 6 different groups. So if you had a middle size SUV, those vehicles competed with each other to be energy efficient. They stopped doing that because they found out, as actually Mr. Chair, as 8th grade students figured out, if you had a vehicle that was a loser in the fee-bait battle, it's because it was the heaviest car and the heaviest SUV, the heaviest midsize, the heaviest upper midsize. It was the heaviest vehicles in those classes. And what the manufacturers did was they just added a little weight to the vehicles, and it made them the lowest weight vehicle in the higher class, and suddenly they began to sell. So when you took a fee-bait program and you ran it by classes like you do prize fighters, lightweight, midweight, light middleweight, heavyweight, etc., you don't get the lightweight person fighting against the heavyweight, and that's how you bring down your the amount of fuel that people use in automobiles. So the cost of administration is a reasonable question. Currently, you could explain to me or anyone else how the tax use, the purchase and use tax is computed. You have a Kelly Blue Book, you buy the car, you pay the tax, you sell the car, you get a credit for some of the taxes that you haven't used towards your next car. You go to motor vehicles, and the person behind the counter looks in the book, they charge you the tax, it's on your bill, you register the car, and you're done. And they already do that now. You would have a similar book that applies to gas mileage, and it would be on the counter in motor vehicles. And when you register your car, you pay your fee. And when you sell it, you get your balance back, and it's done at the same place by the same people. And when I say that you look in your Kelly Blue Book or you look in on your gas mileage book, those are on computer. You press the button, it tells you what it is, and you write the check. So if there's some administrative costs for administering a program like this beyond what motor vehicles would be obliged to do, I'd be curious to hear about it, but I haven't found it. So that was just responding to what the witness was speaking to in the last several minutes. Those are two of the major questions that would need to be answered before such a program would be implemented. And if we were to move ahead and do a fee-based program, we would ask the motor vehicles to prepare how it would be administered and share it with the legislature before it were to be implemented. So it's not like they're going out and doing something that on their own by rule that we haven't double checked, and it gives the motor vehicles an opportunity to craft something and work out some of the bugs before they present it to the legislature to be implemented. So I go back to, and I'll wrap up, that the rural Vermonters who are more likely to buy used cars than new cars go to used car lots to buy used cars. New cars last over 12 years on the road, which means that if we continue as we are doing today to watch pleasure cars get worse gas mileage year after year after year, that's what is going on today, that sales of new cars as a group, new pleasure vehicles, sedans, SUVs, and light pickups get worse gas mileage than they did last year and the year before and the year before, which means the Vermonters, 72% of the registration of vehicles in the state of Vermont are used vehicles that used car buyers get to purchase vehicles whose warranties have run out and whose gas mileage is getting worse year after year after year. That puts them in a very difficult position over which they have no control because they buy used cars. And if we don't tackle that, it is now our largest use of expenditure of fossil fuels is in transportation. The largest group of transportation buyers are used car buyers, and used cars get worse gas mileage year after year. Not to mention that the warranties are run out, and those buyers not only have to pay for cars that get worse gas mileage, but have more doodads and fancy expensive parts that need to be repaired. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Yes, Senator Ingalls.
I'm not going to argue with the senator about whether cars get poorer mileage than what they had in the past. I think there's CAFE standards set nationwide that have taken care of that problem. But I will say that this hammers my constituents in so many ways, and my constituents, for the by and part, are I think we have 4 charging stations in two counties that I represent. We have no public transit to speak of. We have no way to get around other than to buy to what's available to them. There's a lot of my constituents that aren't going to own an electric car in 30 years, never mind what the senator wishes to happen now. There's no way in God's green earth that I'm going to ever support anything like this. And it just it's not going to work for where my district is at. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
My remarks dealt only with gas powered vehicles, and they do not, I wasn't speaking to electric cars, which are those of us that own electric cars are the beneficiaries and get really sweet deals. And no, that's different. It speaks only to gas powered vehicles. What Senator Ingalls is absolutely correct in what he says, that his constituents use gas-powered vehicles and will be doing so for the next decade and a half. And if you're looking at gas mileage and CAFE standards, if you look up in the records of gas-powered vehicles that are sold new in the last several years, get worse gas mileage than the years before, and that trend has been going on for almost 5 years now, and there does not seem to be any change in sight.
I thought the new cars were getting better gas mileage. I know everyone is increasing their gas mileage as I know it, but I don't know, maybe that's not true.
You are correct, Mr. Chair. You are correct that the variety of vehicles for sale at used car lots get better gas mileage than the ones that were on the lots several years ago. But the purchase of cars at new car sales places is favoring the gas guzzlers. So more gas guzzlers are being sold and less, there's a lower sales of efficient cars, which means that on average, the new cars being purchased use more gas than the new cars purchased in past years. And that's worth checking on and not taking my word for it. Yep.
All right. Anybody have any questions of the committee before we go any further? At this point?
Senator Perchlik.
Yes, go ahead. Senator Perchlik, I can't see you. Go right ahead. Yep.
Yeah, I don't have a question for Senator McDonald, but I have a question for Michelle. And
yep, go right ahead. Yep.
Okay, because I think I know what Mike's going to say about the administrative difficulties, and probably hasn't changed since the report from a couple of years ago. So I don't know if we need to hear that, because I think there's just like some fundamental questions. But one thing, Michelle said that there was nothing in the climate action plan about this kind of strategy. There wasn't anything this specific to this. But in Pathway 1, Strategy 2, I just looked it up on page 75, there's a vehicle efficiency price adjustment, which is basically the same concept as part of that electrification strategy. That is in the climate action plan. So correct me if I'm wrong there, if I'm misunderstanding what you said about whether it was in or not in the climate action plan.
Thank you, Senator Perchlik. And you are correct. I did overlook that terminology in preparing for this. And so I do apologize to the committee. So that would be included as one of the potential pathways, strategies within a pathway. Thank you for straightening that out.
And it is worded differently. So, but it's the general concept. And I think, that's probably as deep as we probably want to go as on the concept level. But I also wondered, when you said that you thought it would hurt this kind of concept, maybe the bill might be different than the well, concept or what's in the climate action plan. But why did the agency think it would hurt rural and low income, since it's an adjustment? So you could get your vehicle could be cheaper or it could be more costly depending on the efficiency of the vehicle. So why does that kind of framework, why did you think that hurts low income or rural people more? Why do you think that would, why do you think that adjustment would be always higher for rural and low income?
So I think where the agency would be coming from on that is that, in particular, for working Vermonters who rely upon their vehicle, which in particular related to folks who have trucks or vans in the light duty fleet, which is part of pleasure cars, that there are just so few models available on the market that are going to have the level of vehicle gas mileage efficiency to allow for them to take advantage of receiving a rebate in their purchase. They would more likely have to be on the paying side of things because they did not have as efficient a vehicle as we would be looking to incentivize in this program. And so that's really the underpinning of the concern. I think there would also be a concern that, you know, the price tag for, well, it's hard to say, but the price tag for an efficient vehicle perhaps being out of range for a low to moderate income Vermonter in a scenario of this nature. But most specifically, the folks who rely on vehicles that aren't readily available in the efficient market at this time.
Just another comment, if I can
Go ahead.
share. I mean, at least the way I think of it, it would be just to get more efficient. So, and you would just do it like for a truck. So it's to get the most efficient truck if you're buying a truck. And so if the average miles per gallon for a truck is 20, you would get a rebate if it was 21 miles a gallon. You wouldn't have to all get an electric truck or get a truck that gets 50 miles to the gallon to get the rebate. The goal, and I think the way it was talked about in the climate action plan, is just to try to get us to move in the right direction. As Senator McDonald said, just because of choices that people make, regardless of CAFE standards, you know, they're getting some vehicles that don't get as good as gas mileage. So this would help us to move in the right direction so that there is an incentive to get that 22 miles per gallon truck instead of the one that's 18. And so
what's the incentive, Senator Burton? What would it be? Like, how much are we talking about?
That would be, I think once we get to the point where we agree it's a good thing to figure out, then we'd figure that out. It could be a small number, it could be a large number. It would depend on kind of how you would want to roll it out and how much of an impact. I think, you know, you could have maybe a range of $1,000, you know, that from the worst, you know, the least efficient vehicle to the most efficient vehicle.
A lot of people buy what they can afford. If it's $5,000 more, they can't afford the payment, so they're not going to buy it anyway. I mean, I don't know, you know,
Right.
if it's only to 1 mile per gallon or 2 miles per gallon, doesn't that affect them? Yeah.
Right. And I guess the question is, are lower, and there might be true that lower miles, less efficient vehicles, those that have less miles per gallon are cheaper. I don't know if that's true. It may, you know, for new cars, I don't know if it matters so much, the MPG, as far as the cost. So the goal would be to help low income people buy more efficient cars by saying, hey, we'll give you more money if you need a truck, please get this truck. It gets better miles per gallon. I don't know if those cost more or not. If they do, it's a good point and would be part of the design structure. I think as far as, you know, trying to move in a certain direction with our use of fossil fuels for transportation, this is one option to try to figure out. And I understand DMV's concern about how to administer the program, But I think it's something that we should keep on the table as thinking about as we continue to think about electrification as one of the tools that we could use to move the market in that direction.
Okay, Senator Ingalls.
I think we make a lot of assumptions that these people have a lot of choices. And most of the times they just go out there and pray whatever that they have when they turn the key starts. And that's really where it's at. I mean, that's really where it's at. And, there just aren't a lot of choices, especially now in this marketplace, for these people to go out there. A lot of them couldn't get financed if you gave them within $1 of what they wanted to buy. And so they're buying what they can afford. I just see, we all have pockets of areas where there are people that just don't have much. I have a lot of those pockets, and I see a lot of people walking on the road, great lengths of miles just to live their life, to get to the grocery store and to get to the post office or whatever. I am going to be very, I'm going to be pretty protective of those folks.
Okay.
Chair?
Any other comments this morning?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
you might want to hear from Sue Minter's group in Barry about Senator Ingalls is absolutely correct about people going out to buy used cars and being limited to how much they can pay a month. And if you were to check with I want to say Wellstone, Cornerstone, or
Capstone.
Capstone. Thank you. They will tell you about folks that Senator Ingalls was talking about who go to used car lots and say, I cannot afford this payment per month to buy this car. And what the used car dealers will say is, well, we can cut your payments to what you can afford, but we're going to have to add 2 years on to the number of years you pay for this vehicle. And the folks are stuck. If they want to buy the car and they can only afford so much a month, they put a couple more years on the payment. Well, the cars don't last that long.
But Senator McDonald, we did
yeah.
hear from Capstone.
Thank
and
you.
in fact,
Then
we
I will
increased
stop.
the percentage for their administrative expenditure because the market in which the lower income Vermonters operate, which is the used car market, there aren't the inventory has been so limited that even with the incentive payments we are providing right now to get either higher mileage gas vehicles or hybrids has been so constrained that it's really creating more time, and the number of incentives have not been as great as they anticipated, and the percentage admin that they had was based on the incentives. So we did raise that from 10 to 15%. So I just want to alert you that we did hear from Capstone as it relates to the incentive program that we put in place to provide financial grant assistance to these Vermonters as we try to assist them to move into this to acquire the vehicles, to not only help them buy them, but obviously the ongoing operating costs, whether we're talking about a hybrid or whether we're talking a higher mileage gas engine vehicle. So I just wanted to alert you that we did do that, and in the budget adjustment, we actually increased the percentage that they of the grant that appropriation that they can use to support the program.
What I'd like to do now, we've got one more bill from Senator McDonald before we get to Mike Smith. I think we'll probably reschedule. But so why don't, Mark, while you're here, Senator McDonald, why don't you give us a little overview on S-276 because we'll get to some of our thoughts. I want to get this in before 12 o'clock. So give us a little overview about your S-276, please, about drivers, elderly renewal, operator's license.
The 276 would oblige people 75 and older when they go to renew their licenses to take a driver's test. It would be the same driver's test that we took when we were 15 or 16 back in those days. And if you pass the test, you get to renew your license. That's basically what the bill does. It was prompted.
75 or older, you'd have to, the day you're 75, you'd have to take the written exam and the road exam.
No, you would take the driver's test on the road, behind the wheel driver's test when you went to renew a license, when your renewal came up after you were 75 years old. For
But not
renewals.
not the written test, just the road test, or not the, or
Just the
both?
road test. Yeah,
Road
the
test.
road test.
So
Um,
it
My
cuts off.
goodness,
75.
I'd be scared to do the written test today.
Well, no, I'm
Um,
just trying to get,
yeah,
I'm just trying to get it clear. Okay,
Yes,
so
no,
it would
good
be the-
question, Mr. Chair.
everybody
It would
except-
be the road test that you were obliged to do. I put the bill in because of an unfortunate case where someone whose friends and family suggested that they no longer drive, drove and hit a neighbor, didn't even know it, went home, and it was a death resulting.
Do
And,
statistics prove that 75 is the number, or 60 or 25 or 40?
They
10
no
years.
more than the 18 or 16. It's an arbitrary number that is picked.
So
No
if a
more
person
than-
had a driver's license for a 4-year license or 2 years, whatever you get, would they have to, at 75, go in, or they wait till that license expires?
Wait till that license expires, and when they were up for a normal renewal, they would be obliged to take a road test.
We had a similar bill that was introduced by Senator Clarkson, and we did get data at that time relative to the incidents of accidents. And so I don't remember off the top of my head the details, but it did not indicate the that actually the number of accidents was relatively low, and that was attributed to driving less, not driving at night, and probably not driving as fast. But we did take testimony on a similar bill earlier.
Okay.
That's been my understanding and my experience that older drivers are more cautious. I look twice to the right now and twice to the left. I used to look once each way. I don't drive. My skills aren't as good as they used to be. But when we lose our skills, we're usually, if there's no age in which they go faster for some of us and they come later for others. So that's the idea behind the bill. And I thank you very much for the opportunity to present.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, Anthea, you're with us this morning, but basically it's what the senator has said about the bill. Is there anything different that you found?
Exactly what I would have said. So I'm here if you have questions, but I don't think there will be any for me.
So we do have, I'd like to get that in this morning, someone from AARP, I believe, with us this morning. They have asked to testify. We'll do some briefings here, and we always get back to it, but I just want to get some of these folks that we've scheduled. So we'll leave DMB to last. Sorry about that, but is Greg Marchon or from here?
I am, Chairman. I'm right here. Thank you.
Okay, good. Yeah, why don't you give us your quick overview at this point before we go any further? Yeah,
sure. Thanks very much, Chairman Miles and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify before you this morning. AARP does support safety for all drivers on the road, and we just want folks to know that age itself doesn't cause car crashes. AARP policy supports effective evidence-based assessment models to identify at-risk drivers of all ages. And while state and local governments should ensure that all drivers, regardless of their age, meet the minimum physical requirements and conditions to safely operate a vehicle, ARP wants all drivers to be treated equally. Renewal policies should be evidence-based, such as functional assessments for vision, hearing, and cognitive abilities, and not age-based. Many older drivers continue to be safe and responsible drivers. Drivers at any age, frankly, can have physical and cognitive impairments that would preclude them from safe driving. Therefore, AARP supports, again, this evidence-based assessments for all drivers, regardless of age. Testing is a highly imperfect litmus test where a driver would either pass or fail. Instead, vision or on-road performance and other assessment tools should be used by the DMV to identify potentially at-risk drivers and then put in place the appropriate set of restrictions and remediations to help older drivers compensate for functional impairment. Under Vermont's proposed legislation, an older driver could fail a vision test and have to permanently retire from driving, even if the solution were as simple as getting their cataracts removed. Decisions about driving should be made on a case-by-case basis and not simply on chronological age. A recent study by the National Transportation Safety Board found that speeding was the main factor in 31% of all traffic fatalities. That's nearly the same, the same percentage of fatalities that are caused by intoxicated drivers. Trends are improving for drivers aged 70 to 79, according to the study by the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. Drivers in this age range are now less likely to be involved in a fatal crash than drivers between 34 and 54. Drivers in their 70s also have fewer police-reported crashes per mile traveled than middle-aged drivers. In 2019, the Institute for Highway Safety also reported that motor vehicle crashes accounted for less than 1% of fatalities among people 70 and older. People ages 70 and older are less likely to be licensed to drive compared to younger people, and drivers 70 and older also drive fewer miles. However, older drivers keeping their licenses longer and driving more miles than in the past. So the per mile traveled fatal crash increases are noticeably starting at age 70, 74 are highest amongst drivers 85 and older. The increased fatal crash risk amongst older drivers, it's largely due to increased susceptibility to injury, particularly chest injuries and medical complications, rather than increased tendencies to get into crashes. Regulation requiring in-person renewal or vision tests are the only policies that are associated with lower fatality rates among older drivers and only among drivers 85 and older. State and local governments should improve public safety by requiring all drivers to renew licenses in person at regular interviews. The licensing agencies should require assessment of functional impairments, such as reduced vision or cognitive skills, provide counseling and referrals that enable individuals to seek professional evaluation and remediation for functional impairment, require that individuals who exhibit functional impairments be given a road test tailored to identify impediments to safe driving, and finally, take appropriate action, including issuing licenses tailored to the individual based on road test results. Chairman Maas and the committee, thank you for your time this morning. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for coming. Questions from the gentleman this morning? Any questions? I don't see everybody else. So if you have a question, just jump in. Any member? Okay, I don't hear any questions. Thank you very much for appearing this morning. And we know the issue and we'll take it under consideration. At this time, anybody else would like to comment on this subject?
Chairman, I'm just happy to say that we would love to stay engaged with the committee and lawmakers on this particular issue. I think we all share the common goal of making sure that Vermont drivers are safe and good drivers, whether they're 17 or whether they're 90 and everyone in between, and look forward to engaging you and other members of the committee moving forward. And again, thank you so much for your time.
I think you bring up a good point. We've had this discussion over the years, and it's pretty hard to pinpoint a particular age group because accidents maybe are higher between 20 and 25. I don't, and so it's pretty hard to pinpoint exactly because usually under doctor's advice, they're told to drive, not drive. And if you get a handicap plate, you have to have physical, naturally. I think the doctor has to recommend that. So that we have some precautions in place now, so it's very difficult to draw a line exactly where the age is going to be. So anyone else at this point? Again, thank you. And okay, I believe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. DMV, would you like to comment on this? We have a couple minutes or a later time, or sorry, I'm cutting everybody, but we have meetings at 12:15 and some folks have to get moving.
So
Yes,
we weren't on the schedule to testify on it today, but we do recognize that it is an issue. But we also recognize that age is not the determining factor, right?
Okay.
There's all kinds of individuals that age is not what determines it. So
okay, thank you. You've heard a discussion on the fee bait. I know that's an involved subject, and Mike, before we'll go into details at a later time. So unless the committee wants to hear it now, but I know people got other committees to go to at this point. Anybody from the committee have any questions? Okay. Okay, you can take us off from live. Jeannie, please.